and welcome along to this quick impromptu video where I'm going to take you through some books that I found in a recent hunt for another book which I didn't find but I will find. And these books, I thought when I saw them, I thought I'd like to show them off on the channel. They do mainly pertain to horror films, and I'm going to take you through a reason of why these books are quite important to me, or they have been throughout my horror journey. First I want to talk about this book here, the Slasher Movies book, which I used in a previous video to pick 13 films out that I'm going to watch in the month of October. Now that video got quite a good response, and also it was really good for me just to pick some 30 movies at random, which I probably wouldn't have picked, but I have picked and I will watch, and I will give a review at the end of October to what I thought of those movies, and I'm going to also rank them to say which I like the best out of them particular 13 movies. So that's a little bit about that book. I will link that that video in the description down below, and if you want to watch it and see what I did pick on them 13 films. Also, I think I might do this for the month of November as well, and maybe even December, and it might get me to pick some movies that I probably wouldn't have picked normally, and then look at them with a fresh eyes and pick some, maybe find some hidden gems in the shelves that I personally previously have thought have not been that good. So that was the first sort of bonus pick. I do urge you to buy it. It's still available. It's around about £8 on Amazon, and it might help you pick some movies out that you might have otherwise just not thought about for a long time. I know it did for me. So anyway, these paperbacks that I've got here, I did. If you go back to a certain time, if you can imagine this, when all of this stuff didn't exist, the only way you could sort of revisit a movie when you wanted to was to read a book about it, or read the book of that film. Now, there's obviously a long time with some of these books that this was the only available way of ever knowing about this film. Now, for the likes of this film here, which is 1971's A Clockwork Orange, which is my favourite book of all time. I love this book. I could read this back to back countless, which I have read countless times, but I could read this every night of the week and never get sick of it. It's funny because the book is completely different to the film in most ways, and the book has a lot more of the teenage slang of the future, nadsat, in it, and the film doesn't have as much of nadsat in it as the book does. But the reason why I like the book is because it's really heavy on nadsat. It's like reading a foreign language, and you've got to kind of read it 3 or 4 or 5 times to even understand what you're actually reading. So that's another reason why this book is probably unique in that sense. But at this point, I knew about A Clockwork Orange. Obviously, with it coming out in 1971, there was no way I was going to go as a 5-year-old to the pictures and see it. So the only way I could have this at any, obviously it was not banned, but it was withdrawn in England on home video for release on home video for a long time. Well, actually, until Stanley Kubrick died in 1999, you couldn't get your hands on this legitimately or legally in the UK. So you only had the book to go off, which the book is different to the film, but that gives you an idea of thinking, well, if I wanted to know about this film, the book was the only way of going to this, because before I got my first video player in 1985, but before that you couldn't really watch films. Like, I know you could probably watch things on I know Movie Collector will say he saw films quite early on because he used to get them on a movie projector, which is quite probably a niche market at the time. But your average Joe like myself would only get his hands on a video player in the early 80s if he was lucky, and this is the way that you went forward. You would pick up the novelization of the film. So yes, so Clockwork Orange is my favourite book of all time, and very well, my little brothers, that this was the start of me thinking I need to see more of this sort of thing, horror stuff, even though it's not a horror film as such, if you know what I mean. So I'm not going to go through these if I'm going to say this is the first edition or the 4th edition or anything like that. I will say they're quite early on in the paperback run, and probably they're not the first editions, although I have got the first editions of some books, but these are just like paperbacks that came out round about the time of the film or just after. Next one, Exorcist. I didn't see this on home media for a long time. till it came out really in the late 90s to buy, to watch, because there's another one that just sort of just wouldn't let out. It didn't got banned, but it just did not get into the you couldn't walk into a shop and buy it for a long time. In 1999, 2000, that's when it came out in that format. Obviously it was uncut as well, which is great. Now this here, The Exorcist. Now it's funny because even though I've read Clockwork Orange 1,000 times, I don't think the likes of The Exorcist, I probably would have read it once, just to see what it was all about, or maybe even pick some of these books up because I thought I must have that book because it pertains to a film that's like got a reputation. So if you said to me, what's The Exorcist book like? I don't really know, actually. I can't really remember. And I don't know, when I read it, I must have been that young that I don't know how it affected me or anything, but I do know that I used to navigate to some of these must-see titles in book format because, like I say, at that point, it was the only way to get a hold of it. Now, like I say, I would like to say I know this book, that book, but I've just picked these books out from this pile, and a lot of these books would have been last read years and years ago, but I thought it'd be nice for you to see these sort of things from yesteryear. The next one is a book that I did read, and actually I don't like the book that much because there's a few things in the book that isn't the same as the film. The film for me is much better. There's a few plot developments in this book which I don't like, and I'm glad they didn't put it into the film. And it is Jaws. The first, like I say, the first couple of chapters are really good. I'm not saying that it's not, but the rest of it is just some of the things that Hooper has an affair with Brody's wife, that type of thing, and the ways that the people die in the book is different to the way in the film. And yeah, I just think that the book is just, it's not a letdown, but I remember thinking that the book just wasn't this, because I did see the film on release, so I immediately went and bought the book and thought, right, this has got to be exactly the same as the book, I thought in my young age. Well, obviously the film's adapted from the book. The book is the first draft of the film, if you like to say it that way, and I do feel that the book doesn't deliver in the same way that the film does. But that's quite an early version of the book. I did have an earlier one than that, but I don't know whatever happened to it. It was a really early one. It might have been the first edition, actually. Of course, I had to get the Jaws 2. And I think this is a novelisation of the film. So, excuse me, this book goes in line with some, when these films came out roundabout that were maybe the sequel was a film first and not a book. So the book, they just really just wrote down what happened in the film. So you got like a novelisation of the film. So it's pretty straightforward. As if you've seen Jaws 2, the book would play out exactly the same. And but obviously Jaws and Jaws 2 of the books, Jaws 2 is the better book for me because I enjoy it more. I don't enjoy Jaws book because of them few weird plot twists. Well, I think they're not good in the form of the film. Misses them out, and it doesn't need to have them in. The next one is The Shining. Now, I remember I didn't see The Shining, but I was really interested in what The Shining did, and I thought, well, it's Stephen King, so it's got to be good. Now, the book, I remember disliking the book a lot. I thought the book was okay, but the ending in the book, which I'm really glad that they didn't shoot in the film, is, I thought, ludicrous. And I don't know about you, this might get a lot of hate, this comment, but Stephen King can write a really good book with a really good essential premise. Like, he's got books about, like, The Shining is unique, Carrie, I'm going to blank on all of his, did he write Fluke? I don't know, I think that was James Herbert, but Misery. The books that he wrote were really, really good, but the endings in the books were really, really poor, I thought, compared to the whole thing. The Stand as well, I don't know, I just thought the endings were just a bit of a letdown. Now, this ending in here was a letdown for me. Now, this is the one, I've got the book. I like having the fact I've had the book, but I do think that, and some of these could have come from like car boot sales and stuff like that. So for me, it's a funny thing because I've got the book, but I would never read it again because I don't like what the book, I don't really, think that the book does a good job. I think the ending of The Shining in the film is much better, even though Stephen King cannot stand the film for that reason. Now the next one is a one that I had to get. It is, and I remember seeing the film obviously on release 4 times in a row at the cinema in a week, and this one here was the adaptation of the film, and it's really good actually. I remember reading this book from cover to cover all the time for years and years and years, because obviously when I watched it, you couldn't, in 1980 you could not do anything bar get the book. So until I got the pre-cert in 1985, I must have read this book religiously for 5 years. So no wonder it became a big personal favourite of mine, because if you imagine you saw a film once or 4 times and you wanted to relive that again, you couldn't. The only way you could do is get a book or some book form of it, and then you eventually will get your home release. Now, these days you see a film 3 months later it's out on 4K, so it's mad, isn't it? But this one here is a great book, and also when I found this book again, I read the last couple of pages, and to be honest, I mean, yes, the film is really tugs on your heartstrings, and even the book, I thought, how does the book explain the ending? But the book explains the ending in a certain way, and even that was pretty emotional. Now, as a side note, if you want to know a lot more about the Elephant Man, I suggest you pick this up, The True History of the Elephant Man, and you will find that I don't want to go too much into this, because if somebody hasn't seen the Elephant Man, I don't want to I found that this book spoilt the Elephant Man for me a little bit. I don't really want to go into why, but but this tells you a lot of stuff behind the scene, well, not behind the scenes, but a lot of stuff about Joseph Merrick's life. It tells you interesting little factoids, which I found quite fascinating. The fact that Dr. Treves, it talks more about what Dr. Treves thought of Joseph Merrick and how their relationship was, rather than just what you see in the film. The one that always sticks in my mind is the fact that he always was interested in music, and he used to tap musical patterns on his legs, and he used to do that for a long time in the day and just amuse himself by doing that. And Treves wondered, did he used to do that for himself because he used to spend a lot of time on his own? And that was one of the things that stuck in my mind about this book. But anyway, I do urge you to see this book, watch this, read this book, if you would like to know more about the real history of the Elephant Man, or the true history of the Elephant Man. Now, this is another one that's a novelization of a film. I've got the film. It's pretty good, and it's Dead and Buried, and it's one of them ones where I definitely got this from a car boot sale. Put it on the shelf to read. I don't think I ever read it, but it's there. But I do love the cover, actually. Sometimes you got these embossed covers, and so it's just one of them ones that's like knocking about. Now, this next one is funny because I don't own any of the films in this series. I don't particularly like them, although I do think that the werewolf transformation scene is absolutely brilliant in the first one. Now, this one here is The Return of the Howling. Now, I do think that you could say this is like the Howling 2. I'm sure this is the sequel to the book, but this is not the sequel. This is not the Howling 2 movie. But this book is really, really good, and I would think if they did this as the sequel to the Howling 2 would have been much better. Personally, I think the Howling is quite boring, apart from the werewolf scenes. I do think that this whole cult thing that they had in it was just not my cup of tea, although they do go more into the cult in this book, but I find it very interesting in this book, but I didn't find it in maybe the Howling book, which I haven't got, but I'm sure I had it somewhere, is better than the Howling film. Just saying, just my personal opinion. That. So I got this, saw this one as well. So I got this, the Holland 3, which is a direct sequel to the Howling 2 book, and to be honest, it's all right. It follows the same characters, and it's not as good, but I do remember thinking it was not a bad book in essence. But it's obviously nowhere. It's not like the Howling 3 in the sequels that they have. I don't know what it's up to now. Maybe the Howling 6, but I did lose interest very quickly in the Howling. Now this was a funny one, which it's one of them ones where I used to, this was probably way after the days of you could get pre-certs and get videos, and it is The Nightmare on Elm Street parts 1, 2 and 3, the continuing story. I've probably read this, but I can't remember reading it, and it probably came out, you know, to tie in with obviously with Nightmare on Elm Street 3. And I do recall that way back in the day when I used to watch Nightmare on Elm Street on pre-cert, probably from the video shop, I did like all the series up until about Nightmare on Elm Street 5, and then I kind of switched off from it. But I do plan on getting the box set recently, which I saw being opened on Lauren's collection videos, which I'll put a link down below. And I do feel that she put across a good way of reinvigorating my interest in Nightmare on Elm Street, which is quite dissipated in this at this time. But I do feel like I need to revisit Nightmare on Elm Street. And she said, as well as I think, that Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2 is the best one, or the most enjoyable one, possibly. But I want to go back and see if that's the case. Obviously, everyone goes on about Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, which I quite liked, but I just can't really remember. Now, this one is a sequel, and I'm sure I had more of these books, but this is The Final Conflict, which is sort of the Yeoman Part 3. And I did have I'm sure I had the Yeoman Part 4 as well, the concluding chapter of the Yeoman trilogy, but I'm sure I had the 4th book. And that's another one where I bought, and I don't know why I've still got Part 3. The other ones are probably somewhere, but I don't know where. Probably in another box. Probably in the thing I'm looking for is probably in the book, is in the box that I'm looking for. It might be in there. It's another one I don't have much knowledge of, but yeah, it's probably, I probably used to go past shops and see these and just think that's to do with a horror film, I'll buy it. So the last one is a one that I got, or the last one in the film side of things that was from an adaptation of a film, is Aliens. Now, when Aliens come out, obviously it was a bit of a groundbreaker, because to go from Alien, which was a dark horror film, to go to Aliens, which was a sort of action romp, was quite a change, but a welcome change. And I think that it obviously, all fans of Alien thought Aliens was amazing, and then they thought Aliens 3 was going to be better. How we were wrong. And so yeah, so this is another one which will be a straight adaptation of the film. And do I remember reading it? No, I don't. I would have read it, because I think I've read all these in one point of time. But you got to think that this was like in the 80s when I probably last read this, and I had it on the shelf for years and years and years. The shelves used to be here; they've all been taken away in favour of these ones, which obviously for me is more of a better thing to have on your wall. So that's it for the ones that tie into movies. Now, as a sort of bonus couple of books, I just want to take you through a few that popped out when I opened them up. I thought there was a couple more, and I thought, well, they don't really resonate with anybody, but I thought I'd just get you. I'll show you a couple of these now. And this one, you get some strange books on paperbacks. I mean, these, I don't know why I picked I probably was going to try and get the trilogy and read them. I'll be interested to go back and read this one just to see if it's a straight adaptation of the film. It probably is, or is it like a proper novel that film was taken off? But I don't think so. I think this is probably it's straightforward, just what happened in the film. An odd book to have. Another one which was a bit of an odd thing, and I did want to get more of these, but I only saw this one, and this is definitely used to go to these really old bookshops, and they used to be more like a sort of car boot sale inside, and they had wall to wall. I still know where the shop is actually, although it's not a bookshop. It's not been a bookshop for years and years and years, but it still exists in Whitley Bay. And this one here, I'm sure I read it, but I really wanted to read part 1, because I think this was, I don't think it ties in with anything to do with any of the films. It's this whole reimagination, new adventures of Frankenstein. It's probably Donald F. Glutt's take on what Frankenstein was all about. But it's one of them ones where now I might go to eBay and see if I can find part 1 and just give them a read and see if they are a good, I don't know how many came out of it, but it was a strange one that I thought you used to get a lot of these things, you know, adaptations. You used to get, I'm sure I had Rollerball as well, which Rollerball is a very short part of a book. It's amazing how they've got a film out of this, because it's about 40 pages long or something. Rollerball, it's more like a short story. This book here, I remember my mate said to us, you want to read this book because you'll never see nothing like it. Now, if you're a fan of The Exorcist, you might have know about this book. This book, as far as I know, has never been made into a film. It's called Damon, and it tells the story of a boy who, it's a really good book. I've read it a lot of times, but I can't imagine this ever being made into a film because it is so explicit, for want of a better word. A 4-year-old boy with the mind of a genius and the body of a man. Now, it's got some really good twists and turns on the fact of this Damon, who is a breathtaking story of a boy tormented by a mysterious and terrifying second self, his motivation twisted, his sexual desires demanding satisfaction. Damon captures you from the first page and doesn't even let you go until you've finished. A well-written chiller, a cliffhanger plot. The announcement, is that? I don't even know what that word says. The denouement is a shocker. Wow. So yes, so if you can get this book, I do urge you to read it, because it is so, it's like a sort of Exorcist companion, but in a really dark way. You just wouldn't believe what they've put in this book. I think a lot of books are more descriptive than films, actually, because I don't think they would ever be able to film that today. This next one is one of my favourite books of all time. It is just, if you can imagine, you know how you have these really cheap horror films, and probably no one's ever heard of, and you get them in the pound shop, and you get them, and they're just absolute garbage, but you kind of like them for some reason. I could imagine this film, this book has never been made into a film as far as I know, The Slime Beast. This is the second book I had. The first one, I had it in my school bag, and it felt a bit, because it was at the bottom of my school bag, and I used to read it all the time, and it just disintegrated. So I went and got this from eBay and read it a lot of times, because I didn't have it available. It was for a long time. I would love to get it with the original cover on it, which my gran bought it for us. Now, if my gran knew what was in here, it is quite shocking and explicit in this book. She wouldn't have never bought it for us. But it's about a slime beast that comes down, and it a little bit like, I mean, this must have been written in the 70s. This book, this slime beast is put into like a marsh, and he lives there for years and years. But he doesn't live there; he exists there for years and years. And then someone digs him up. Some excavatives. I'm going to have trouble with that one. Excavationists, is that a word? I'll have to get a dictionary for this. They expose the slime beast, and the slime beast goes around and kills all these people. But I think that this book is a really good book, and I would love to think they would make a film. They would probably never make a film of it now, but I think it would have been a really good film back in the day. So the last one I want to talk about is, I don't know if anybody remembers these, but I'm sure if you're of a certain age, you used to get these panned book of horrors, and they would be short story. This is the first panned book of horror stories. I think they went up to around about 40 or 50, and they would, by Herbert, I think they're selected by Herbert Van Thal. So you would have a short story, and they would, you would read these, and they were like sort of like these little horror things. Most of them could probably be made into films, and some of the covers, this cover's not that grotesque, but some of the covers were really frightening and really awful. You would see them in the bookshop, and you would think, oh, I wonder what's in there. So when I started buying them, I used to read these all the time, and I would think that some of the stories in here, they usually had shock endings, and sometimes you used to read them and with that shock in the endings that you couldn't get to sleep at night. And it was a funny time, because this was probably your only way of, you know, really frightening yourself at night. There was no way you can get your hands on anything that was resembled anything like moving pictures, so you had to go for the books. So anyway, I just thought I'd show you those ones, and I'm glad that the lights held out for this video. And I just thought I would like to put this here just as a different one, just because I come across them, and I thought, rather than just put them straight back in the box, I thought I'd take you through them, and maybe you might get something out of it as a bit of a trip down memory lane as well, because it's been quite a trip for me, actually. I think there's a couple in there that I would like to reinvestigate. So thanks for watching. If you like this channel, please like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below to anything that you want to talk about in there. If you've got a similar collection, or those are things that you didn't know existed. So thanks once again, and I'll see you in the next video.